Hello, everyone. I hope you had a really good break. I was able to get up, stretch, and grab something to eat. My partner made me coffee. I'm very internally grateful, and I have some water, so I'm set. I am steadily trying to admit people into this session, but Henrietta, are you ready to go? Do you need anything from me?
I am ready to go. I don't need anything. If you
Excellent.
could just monitor the chat
Will do.
for questions, and I don't think it's going to take that long, so we should have enough time for question and answer session, hopefully at the end. But yeah, I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly so that way people can ask the questions that they need to ask.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'm going to stop my video just so that way it helps with ease of presenting and all of that good stuff. And then I'll get back on afterwards.
Fabulous. Fabulous. All right. All right. It is 1 p.m. on our exciting day of our virtual development days. So next up is Registrars. Will present and talk to us about FERPA and some of the exciting things that they're doing in their department as well. So with that, I will invite Henrietta Romero, who you're completing your doctorate as well, right, Henrietta?
I'm trying to get there, yeah.
Yes. Good luck. Congratulations.
I'm APD 2 semesters away, so.
Oh, that's exciting. So without further ado, I will turn off my stuff and let you have at it.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate the time today. Welcome to everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I've turned off my camera just for ease of presenting and things like that, but I'll turn it back on if y'all want to see my face afterwards. I am the University Registrar for New Mexico Highlands.
Okay, we're good now.
I am very excited to be here today to present some FERPA basics, to kind of go over some basic stuff for you all. Welcome to all of the new staff and faculty to the institution. You have come to a wonderful place and I am excited to work with you. As always, my office is available for any type of assistance that you might need with regards to registration or registrar related functions. My contact information will be at the end. And I'll also be sure to provide some contact information generally for the registrar staff here in the chat for everyone. So Veronica will moderate questions so that way I can go ahead and answer those at the end. Hopefully this won't take the full hour. I'm looking at hopefully probably about 30-40 minutes at most. That way I can answer whatever questions you all have that come up. So let's get started with the fun part of what we do in higher ed, which is FERPA. We're just going to go over basics today. So to get started, I just kind of want to go over what the basic definition of FERPA is. It is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. It's also known as the Buckley Amendment. It applies to all educational institutions that receive any type of funding from the Secretary of Education. It is administered from the Family Policy Compliance Office, which is a subunit of the Department of Ed. Who does FERPA apply to? Basically everyone, again, who receives any type of funding administered under the Secretary of Ed. Anyone who creates and maintains an educational record, who utilize an educational record in performing the overall duties of your jobs, those who disclose information from educational records, and those who are custodians of the educational record, and most importantly, every single one of you. Definitions. Let's go over some basic definitions with regards to what FERPA designates as an eligible student. So institutions overall have the ability to determine when a student becomes eligible. Some institutions indicate that this happens at the time of admission. So if they've been admitted to the institution, that's when they're considered an eligible student. In some instances, institutions use eligible student as a student who has matriculated, so officially enrolled, regardless of whether the semester has begun or not. So during early registration periods, If the semester hasn't begun and the student has enrolled, that's considered an eligible student, and that is the definition that is used by the institution, so by New Mexico Highlands University. Attendance. Attendance means when someone has attempted or has matriculated in some way, shape, or form to the post-secondary institution. This can mean that the individual registered for courses during the early registration period. Come the beginning of the semester, if things didn't work out, they had to drop all of their courses and maybe they didn't get any grades. That's still considered attendance under the federal guideline, which means we have to maintain the record. And so attendance under FERPA means any attempt to matriculate, even if the student dropped and did not complete coursework. Legitimate educational interest. Legitimate educational interest is one of the most important facets under FERPA with regards to how individuals in institutions access and use the information available to them on our students. What it means is that you need the information on the student, the specific student, in order for you to perform the basic duties of your role. This doesn't mean that you're advising your sons and your daughters and your nieces and your nephews and your grandchildren. This means that you need the information in order for you to perform a basic duty in your specific role for the institution. School official. School official is broad and there's not an exhaustive list. However, it does include anyone who is directly or indirectly employed by the institution, which includes our insurance agents. It includes our legal team. It includes our Board of Regents. It includes any vendors that we work with. Those are also considered school officials because we have some sort of interaction with them at some form when we're conducting our overall operations. Now, not all of the school officials that are identified that I just mentioned technically have access to student information. In most instances, the school officials that are indirectly contracted by the institution don't always have access to student information. And so the agreements that are made with those third-party entities outline whether or not they have access to student information or not. The education record, that also is not an exhaustive list. And it's also not just the record that's maintained in Registrar. So I want to make it really clear that the education record is really, really expanded across the institution in various forms. It includes anything that is maintained by a department or an academic unit or an area of the institution that can specifically identify a student. That includes our LMS, so like our Brightspace systems. It includes our self-service systems. It includes any tutoring software that we have, any kind of platform that can identify the student specifically by name and or student ID number is considered an education record. Eligible parent or guardian. Eligible parent or guardian means someone that can establish proof or provide proof that the eligible student is their dependent under Section 152 of the IRS tax code, which means, do they claim them as a dependent on their most recent year's tax return? Or is there some other form of agreement with regards to how this parent becomes eligible? There's always some gray area with regards to parents who are custodial and non-custodial parents. And so basically what the definition states is that if you give access to one parent, you give access to the other parent as well, and you kind of treat them the same. Obviously, institutions have to monitor those cases on obviously a case-by-case basis, but it's in the best interest to make sure that it's fair across the board with both parents in the event that access is granted. Now, students do have some primary rights under FERPA, and everyone needs to know what these primary rights are. First off, they have the right to inspect and review the education record. As I mentioned, the education record is quite vast across the institution. So if a student requests inspection and review, the request has to be submitted in writing to this office, to the registrar's office. There is a request form available online for students to complete. We have to provide a date, time, and place within 45 calendar days. That includes weekends and holidays, in order to provide the inspection and review. And when the inspection and review happens, the student also has to indicate the specific education record they want to review. Students cannot submit a request that says, I want to review all of my education records. The federal compliance and the law overall specifically states that students have to identify which parts of the education record they want to inspect and review. They also have the right to some control over the disclosure of the information from education records. For faculty, you may see on your grade rosters or your class rosters that there are students that have the word confidential next to their name. That means that no information on that student can be released to a third party without the written consent of the student first. Some students don't have that. But in the event for Highlands overall, we do not release information to a third party other than the student unless we have written consent on file. And that consent is housed in this office. Students submit those requests here. If students seek an amendment of their record, they have a right to do that. They can ask for it. So they would ask for it in writing after the inspection and review. Now, the way that the amendment to education records works is that a student can only seek to request an amendment if they feel that the information listed or contained in the education record is misleading to the normal layperson to understand the record overall. Now, just because a student submits the request in order for them to have an amendment to the record, it doesn't mean that it happens. The institution has discretion as to whether or not the amendment will occur. If the amendment does not occur to the education record, the student is permitted to provide a statement to provide clarity on the misleading information that they believe is contained in the file. And then lastly, which is the one we don't ever want, is students have the right to file a complaint with the Family Policy Compliance Office. If a student feels like their FERPA rights have been violated, which means unauthorized disclosure of their educational record, they have a right to file a complaint within 180 days of the occurrence, and that's calendar days, to the Family Policy Compliance Office. If a complaint is submitted, the Family Policy Compliance Office will first contact this office, and then they will do kind of an internal investigation to kind of see what happened, how did it all transpire, how is the campus being trained, thus why you all are here getting your annual compliance training. So that way, if that ever was to happen, we can say we conducted our compliance training for the campus-wide for our staff and faculty on these specific dates. In the event that there happens to be an instance where an institution is found to have violated a student's rights, there is sometimes some monetary sanctions. I have yet to see some pretty hefty ones. One of the main sanctions that's identified in the federal compliance itself is that institutions can have their Title IV funding removed, which is our financial aid program. In the history of me doing this, in almost 17 years, I have yet to see an institution that's had their Title IV funding pulled for a specific FERPA instance. And this document is called the annual notification. The institution is required to provide annual notification to its students on an annual basis with regards to what their 4 primary rights are under FERPA, which are the ones that we just talked about. It also identifies for students at the very bottom in the bold section what NMHU considers directory information. Now, at the discretion of the institution, we can release the student's name, address, telephone listing, electronic mail address, photograph, all of those things listed in that list without prior written consent of the student. Again, I must preface this by saying we will do that at the discretion of the institution. I don't know many institutions that do it on purpose or do it just to. I think for the most part, as registrars, even across the nation, we really are very sticklers about directory information and whether we release it or we don't. And so one good practice for everyone is this form is actually available on the NMHU website under the Registrar's office. If you happen to see students like in your office or you serve students in your specific area, it's best practice to have this particular form just posted in an inconspicuous place. This also kind of covers us when it comes to the notification process for the annual notification that we're supposed to do. This information also appears in the catalog, and it also appears on the NMHU self-service, so the NMHU portal that's available for students once they log in. If they're trying to add classes or they're looking at their records on there, if it's a new semester, then this actual notice comes up for students to read, and then they actually click an I understand button after they've read this. Directory information, again, this is basically what was listed on the annual notification. This is pretty much an exhaustive list that's provided with the federal rules. Institutions have the ability to determine at any point whether or not some items from directory information are not considered directory information. We are not obligated to provide all of these items or list all of these items as directory information. So I think that institutions can be proactive in terms of determining what's in the best interest of their students when they release directory information lists. Institutions get those all the time, especially when it comes to those individuals who are recruiting for our armed services. And so they will come in and ask for a directory information list, which they're eligible for once every 12 months. And so we have to be very proactive in the type of information that we're releasing on our students for the directory information list. Legitimate educational interest in you. Again, legitimate educational interest does not mean everyone. So not everyone has a legitimate educational interest in order to review or have access or gain access to a student record. The basic definition for that is, do you need the information to perform the basic duties of your job? Again, this doesn't mean that we're helping our nieces and our nephews and our relatives. The best thing for you to do is for you to be able to forward that person to the expert regarding that particular instance that they need assistance with in order to make sure that they get helped in the most proper way. And the other thing about it too is the integrity of your processes and compliance really does rest on legitimate educational interest and access to the student data. As I've mentioned, protection of the student data is always the primary concern. Grants for access to the institutional SIS, which is the Student Information System for us, Banner, should be preceded either by a FERPA waiver and or annual training. And so in this case, y'all are being trained for your annual compliance training, and all requests for data can be denied internally if a legitimate educational interest cannot be established. Obviously, there are some exceptions that apply. Those exceptions are under the umbrella of health and safety emergency to the student, health and safety emergency to the campus overall. If you receive requests with regards to student information from the education record, forward those requests onto the proper records custodian. We would be able to determine whether or not a release of those records could be utilized by that person and or gained by that person. Obviously, you want to ensure that your student records, this goes for every department on campus or in the university that maintains a file for a student, that they are in orderly fashion and that they only identify the student and not a group of students. Those records are in fact subject to inspection and review. Ensure you maintain the integrity of the student record. Again, don't involve yourself in an action that will question your integrity or your legitimate educational interest. Keep any personal sole possession records relating to individual students separate from the education record. Sole possession records are not subject to inspection and review. An example of a sole possession record is if you keep a voicemail log in your office to document, I got a phone call at this day, this time from this person, and this is when I called them back. That's considered a sole possession record. You don't have to include that with the education record. The minute it is included with the education record, you can't remove it. But if you maintain just an overall voicemail log of when you return phone calls, that's considered sole possession record and is not subject to inspection and review. Just some don'ts to kind of go over some general information about what not to do. Don't display student scores or grades publicly in association with the student's name, social, student ID number, or personal identifier. Back in the day, I know that grades would be posted on a faculty member's door and you would check to see if you passed your chem or your math or your computer science class or your art class, and everyone would be able to see that. These days, you cannot do it if it's in association with the student ID number or username or social. And also don't request access for information from the educational record without the legitimate educational interest and a proper authority to do so. I will remind you throughout that legitimate educational interest means that you need that information in order to perform the basic duties of your job. Also, don't submit requests for access to the student information system unless you have a legitimate educational interest. Don't discuss the education record of any student with anyone other than the student. This includes parents without verified written consent of the student. On the NMHU self-service on the faculty page, there is a way for you to be able to see whether there is a release on file and if it is active. The institution is not obligated to provide information to parents or third parties on a student, even if there is a written consent on file. So the institution gets to determine under what circumstances we would provide information to that third party, even with the written release from the student. The written release from the student is not a must, it's a may. And so the institution will make that discretionary decision as to whether or not to share information. Don't provide list of students for any commercial purpose. Some academic departments might be solicited for some information on their potential graduates or students in a specific program. And so if you ever get those requests, those are always good to either send to myself or to Sean Weaver at University Relations. Between his office and my office, we can determine whether or not the request is a legitimate one that needs to be fulfilled. And don't provide anyone with schedules or assist anyone in finding a student on campus. Obviously, there are still exceptions that apply to this as well. But if someone happens to call your office or your department and they say, I have this emergency, I need to find my student, I need to do this. I've had instances where that's happened already. The best thing to do is to just take the person's name and phone number with regards to who they need to reach, the student they're trying to locate, and immediately contact this office as well as campus police. Between our office and campus police, we will determine whether or not contact needs to be made with the student. And the reason for that is for safety and security of our students. Exceptions that apply, again, is health and safety related to the students themselves, as well as health and safety related with regards to the campus. What about parents? Well, many of us probably are parents. I know I'm a parent. I have two children that I'm sure I'm going to be kind of a helicopter mom when it comes to this as they get to post-secondary ed. But just so that way you're aware, FERPA rights transfer to the student either at age 18 or once the student attends post-secondary institution regardless of age. Now this means dual credit, right? Dual credit and concurrent students. Institutions will decide when FERPA begins, and we've already determined that it happens when a student matriculates, once they register here. And so we'll always have parents who will call and be like, well, I'm the one who pays the bill. We are very delighted that you would pay the bill, and we thank you for your tuition money. However, if we don't have a release on file, it's in the institution's best interest to not release information. And we have a general rule in the registrar's office where we do not release grades or GPA by phone, not even to students, only because we have the online system for students to obtain that information, as well as degree audit. That also helps students gain some information with regards to their progress as well. Granted, we don't have a parent portal for parents to be able to have access to that, but that's where parents have to communicate effectively with their students in terms of getting the information that they need from the education record. Parents or legal guardians can obtain some directory information at the institution's discretion. It really depends on the information that the parents are asking for. It's really hard to say that they ask for one specific thing all the time, because in most cases they want everything all at once, and sometimes we just can't do that. So we will determine when a parent contacts us whether or not we can provide them with the information that they're seeking. And parents or legal guardians can obtain non-directory information at the discretion of the institution if they can establish that the student is a financial dependent, again, under section 152 of the IRS tax code that indicates how dependents are defined. If we can prove, the parent can prove to us that the student has in fact been established as their dependent in the most recent tax year, then we will take those things into consideration. The parents can submit a request form, which is also available for them online to submit that to us, so that way they can gain access if their student doesn't submit a request. Now, keep in mind that when parents submit their own request to ask for access to a student record, that request expires at the end of the academic year, only because come the end of the academic year, the next year, the student may not be a financial dependent of that person any longer. And so we have to take it academic year by academic year when it comes to accessing and releasing information to parents overall. And obviously we can work with parents if we have a written consent from the student to do so. Well, I have a great FERPA joke, but I can't tell you. Just tried to give a little bit of humor here. And basically, I just want to say, if you're in doubt, don't give it out. Really, if you're having a conversation with a third party, with a parent, someone other than the student who is trying to gain access, if you're unsure, you don't have to give an immediate response to that person. Know that your immediate responses to access a student's record is not required by any means whatsoever. And so you can take the name and the phone number of that student or that individual who's contacting you and what they're asking for. And if you need to, you can reach out to my office. Myself is the Chief Compliance Officer in the Registrar's office with regards to this, so I can kind of help you fill those questions and those unique instances that might come up. You can also reach out to any member of our staff, and they'll get it to me in order for us to be able to kind of help you. But essentially, if you're in doubt, don't give it out. That's just the best advice that I could give you overall. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. And then here's some information with regards to where this information comes from. Veronica's also going to provide a link to the Department of Ed website here in the chat pretty soon for everyone if you want to check that out. They also offer a training online that allows for you to get a certificate that says that you completed the FERPA compliance training. So you could do that as well if you would like. So right now I'm going to stop my share and I'll field any questions. I appreciate everyone's attendance today. Happy FERPA trails. There is my contact information. That extension is directly to my office, so you'll get directly to me, as well as my email address. I am listed in the directory as well. And I wish you guys all the best this fall semester and hope that everything goes well and everyone stays safe and healthy.
Henrietta,
Yes.
there's quite a few questions in the chat. Would you like me to send those to you right now?
So let's see, do I have some time to field them right now?
You do. You have about 20 minutes.
Okay, awesome. Veronica, do you want to guide me as to which is the first one? Let's see.
Of course. Let me scroll back up. Okay. Dr. Gatson asks, how do we ensure a parent has been approved for FERPA? I have asked parents in the past, but they don't always have evidence that they have been approved.
Most parents are not going to have evidence of it, mostly because their student is probably not going to give them a copy of the form that they have submitted to this office to say, yes, you can speak to my parent or to my third party with regards to my record. The information is actually listed in self-service. So in the NMHU portal, under your faculty, there is a comments section there for you to review whether or not the student has submitted a release for a third party. It'll tell you who the third party is, the name, all of that information, as well as what they have access to. Or, as I mentioned before, you don't have to give an immediate response to anyone. You can take a name and a phone number and what they want to know. And if you need to, you're welcome to reach out to this office and we can verify it for you before you even make contact back with them about what they're asking for.
Awesome. Dr. Gasson has another question up here. What if the parent and student are both on the phone and the student says, like, go ahead, talk to the parent. Do you still need to ask about FERPA?
So the general practice is if a student, especially now during COVID, right? Because students typically are not here. We don't have a lot of students on campus. A lot of people are remote. So if a student is identifying themselves to you and you've already gone through the process of kind of, you know, knowing that it's the student, it's really hard to identify someone over the phone. We don't have sophisticated measures for us to do that with like a special passcode or anything like that. But if you have every reason to believe that you are speaking to the student and they're like on speakerphone with their parent, you're welcome to have the conversation. You're welcome to kind of answer their questions. But keep in mind that the fielding of the questions comes from the students and the answers go to the students. They don't go to the parent. And so basically one of the things to remember is that when you're speaking to someone, it's all student related. And so a lot of your answers have to be directed towards the student and not necessarily towards the parent. But it's best practice if you already know, especially now during COVID times, that you feel like you're talking to the student. I would have no issue whatsoever with you having them on speakerphone to answer questions.
Fabulous. And could you please discuss faculty's ability to discuss specific students with fellow faculty members?
So with regards to faculty communication, it needs to be with regards to progress, right? And or instances in which it's not like, oh, do you have this student in your office? Or do you have this student in your class? They're so disruptive. It has to be with regards to all of the instances in which they make or don't make progress in your class. You can't have just free-on conversations about students with each other. It has to be academically related.
Awesome. And Dr. Garcia's question is it acceptable to provide aggregated autonomy information, for example, a class average test grade?
To whom?
I'm not sure. Dr. Garcia, if you would like to elaborate, please feel free to. Oh, there might be stuff. Oh, the whole class, she says.
Yeah. So best practice is to not do that. It is an average, right? Which means you can't personally identify someone specifically or a student's grade. Grading overall in the classroom, it's not permitted for you to discuss grading in the classroom. So like, even if you have an exam per se, pre-COVID days, there was an exam, everybody took the exam, students are coming into the class, there's a table there, all the exams are laying on the table. That is a violation of students' FERPA rights. That means that people have the ability to see the grades of other students, and so they need to be handed out individually. I wouldn't say that it's best practice, but if you're trying to give a class average, as long as it's not personally identifying specific students, it should be fine.
Awesome. and Luke Ritter. Luke, I know you're new. Hello, welcome to Highlands. Your question, you mentioned not posting students' grades publicly. Is it okay for instructors to post students' daily participation publicly?
Is the participation part of whether or not they pass the course? If it is part of the way that they pass the course, if like their participation has something to do with the overall grade in their class, no, you cannot.
Awesome. And then the next question, please forgive me. I'm not sure it's someone's email address, so please forgive this. But I'm just going to go with the question. Does a student's email ID also included under a student's identity? Sometimes we use email class list, for example, on Brightspace. That way all students could see each other's email ID.
So if you're using the LMS like Brightspace, that's a approved systematic way in order for you to communicate with the class entirely. That's different. Now, if you're communicating just through the general email system with regards to progress, right? So when it comes to progress and grading and GPA and things like that, as well as letters of recommendation, those things should not go to multiple students. Now, if you're using the LMS system because it's class related, it's an assignment related, it's what the class needs to do, those are approved methods in order for faculty to communicate with their students. And students have access to that. So like if a student was to go there and they wanted to email the whole class, they literally could, because it's available to them in the LMS.
Fabulous. I think that is all the questions. I do have a couple of comments about the joke was pretty rough. But if there are any other questions, we have about another 15 minutes.
So in the chat, I'm going to just put in the registrar email box. If you ever have questions, please feel free to email our office at this number. We also have our office number. There are members of my staff that are on campus and available to answer questions for you. So by all means, please use the registrar email. It's registrar@nmhu.edu. Again, if you don't reach me directly, but you're able to reach that email address is manned by 4 staff in my office. And so if my staffers can't field it, they're going to send it off to me and we'll be able to help you. And again, if you ever feel like you're just unsure about whether or not to release information to someone, you don't have to do it on the spot. By all means, please contact us. We'll help you through that process.
I see that there is one more question I missed, so please forgive me. Ernestine Clayton asked, does Highlands have a legal guardian form?
Yes, we do. So the form that's available online is not only for parents, but for legal guardians as well. Because we can't always assume that the third party person is in fact a parent. It could very well be a legal guardian. And so that form is made for both of those types of instances. So not only parents, but also legal guardians as well. Because it may be a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or, you know, something like that.
Excellent. Excellent. Is okay.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. In terms of doing institutional research, you know, if you were looking for students that meet specific criteria to, you know, I'm going to be the director of assessment and accreditation. Is that something where you would have to get permission in advance?
So there should be some sort of permission that happens with regards to research. I know that many institutions have an institutional review board, and there's a specific way that you're supposed to go about contacting those students. So it may be a multitude of our office, university relations, as well as institutional research. So it depends on what the overall kind of contact method or what group of students you're trying to reach out to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I think one more question fell into the chat. Is it Arcadius? Is that correct? Excellent. The question is, am I required to discuss students' grade over the phone? Can I just refer the parents to Registrar's office to reply via email so that there is a proper paper trail?
So we do not provide grades to anyone over the phone. That includes parents, even if they have a release on file. So by all means, if you faculty specifically are contacted by a parent and they want grades, by all means, please refer that request to this office. We will be happy to field that and work with the parents to provide them with the appropriate information to gain access to that information through their student. And no one is ever required, even if there's a release on file, we are not required. It's a may, not a must.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So, woo, okay. Oh, okay. Another question. Wow, these are just coming at you. What are considered the approved means of contacting students?
The approved means to contact students is obviously through the LMS, so Brightspace. That's an officially approved system to communicate with students. The other way for you to communicate with students according to the institutional policy is via their assigned NMHU email address. The Registrar's office has a specific policy that we only communicate with students via their NMHU email address. And so it's in the best interest of everyone across the campus to engage in that same type of practice. Even if your department hasn't instituted a specific policy like that, there is an institutional policy that exists in the catalog.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And Buddy asks, what about the use of team chat through our 365 office account?
So everyone, I believe, that has an NMHU account has the Teams platform. If you haven't used it before, it's pretty cool, by the way. But that is an approved way for you to speak with your students with regards to their information. One, because it's secured by the servers of the institution. So it's not like you're using something external like Facebook Messenger, for example.
Excellent.
Audrey.
All right. I think that's all of the questions in chat. We've got like 9 more minutes. We could, if we want to, we could call this early. And of course you have Henrietta's information and her contact information, and you can reach out if there are any other sparks of inspirations and questions that come at you throughout the rest of the week and throughout the rest of the semester. So if there is no other questions, we can take an extra time to stretch our legs before we get into our next sessions.
Thank you all for attending. All the best to the fall semester.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the general faculty meeting.
Thank you.
Way to go, Henrietta.
Thanks. So real quick, do you want me to send this PowerPoint to you to post on the CTE website?
If you don't mind, I would really appreciate that.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Excellent.
And then you can also post the link that I had given you for the compliance training on DOE website. You can post that one there as well.
Perfect.
That one's always active. And so if somebody misses this, then it's a good way to just send them off to that resource so that way they know what to do.
Perfect. Will do. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
one.
You too.